caveat, I'm going to be talking today about how I do finishing. That is not to say that's the only right way to do it. It isn't even to say it's the right way to do it, but it works for me. And finishing is one of those artistic things. There's lots of ideas, and some great ideas too. Far better than what I'm doing today. Very likely, very possible. But maybe for the time at the end, we can have some folks offer up some ideas for the rest of the crowd on their success stories or how they resolve the problem with finishing. So, you know, it's best, I think, when we work for each other rather than just have someone up here kind of preach what they think is right. One of the most important things that I think to start out with is safety. These are all chemicals which can cause harm to you, and if they catch fire, harm to certainly your building, and possibly to others around too. So personal safety, I think, is important to make sure that you don't allow these fumes to concentrate in such a way that they can harm you or possibly ignite if there's an ignition source in the area. I work in a garage shop. Some folks have gas fire and hot water heaters in their garage. You get the concentrations enough, bad things can happen. Maybe not likely, but you don't even want to think about getting close to that point. So ventilation is important. Open containers near a source of ignition could be a problem. Probably most often, though, is spontaneous combustion. You know, when you soak a rag or a piece of rag with something and you kind of roll it up and you put it in the trash, the reaction for those polymers or those polymerizing continues, and it gives off heat. If it's concentrated in a ball, that heat can get to the point that it'll combust. What I do, I work with little pieces of, I'm applying it, usually it's white bond, little pieces of paper towel or shop towel, the blue shop towel, paper towel, a little thicker. And I lay it out flat, either on the floor or on the bench. When it's not flat and open to the air, yeah, the reaction continues, but the heat isn't concentrated, it can't combust. Some people say put it in a bucket of water, well, that's fine. But I think that's unnecessary, and I've never had a problem or even any sense that heat was building up. So it's laid out flat, it can't build up heat, and you're safe. So there's something to think about. A lot of bad actions that happen due to spontaneous combustion. Environment.
On that note, if you've got a spray booth with a filter, that you want to hose down at the end of the day. Most of the when I get calls about something going up, it's invariably spray booth filters, and you know those tend to go boom.
The next is the environment. If you want a decent finish, you need to avoid getting dust on it. Dust-free environment. Where I do my finishing in my shop, there's an air cleaner right above it, which really services the whole shop, but it keeps the air where I'm finishing as clean as I can make it. And I also don't put finish on and walk over to the lathe and start sanding something. You know, even with dust collection, it throws it where you don't want it. Plenty of light. I like a lot of light. I like cast light on every machine I have, and I like a light over the lathe, over the finishing area. Because if you can't see it, you can't avoid the defect, whatever it might be. And even then, you find you miss spots and so on and so forth. You have to go back and do it. But light is really important, especially when you're trying to get a sheen. You really need to see the light different ways so that you can see where the sheen is and where it's not. Temperature and humidity. If it's cold or highly humid, some finishes won't cure. They'll be very slow to cure. So if I have something in the wintertime, sometimes not too bad. In the wintertime, it get really cold in my shop. I might take it inside on the dining room table over paper or something like that, so it can dry overnight, rather than leave it in the shop where it's cold, because it may take far longer to cure than what I want it. So, types of finishes.
What do you mean by cold?
Cold. No, 40s and 50s. 40s. I mean, there's a gray area there where it really doesn't affect much, and it just kind of slows it down.
If it's colder than 50 degrees, take it inside.
Do it in such a way that you don't really know your wife. A lot of ways to categorize finishes. A brief intro into what finishes are before we talk about technique. Evaporative finishes. They cure by evaporating the solvent that they're mixed with. Things like lacquer and shellac. And one practical aspect of that, second coats semi-dissolve the first coat and have great bonding. Whereas reactive finishes, where a chemical reaction takes place, The reaction occurs when oxygen reacts with the resins and the dryers, because a chemical reaction takes place to actually cure it, so that it gets hard. If it cures long enough, it maybe need a little bit of abrasion there, so the next subsequent coats will bond well. I haven't had an adhesion problem between coats, but I always sand between coats anyhow. So. Oils, two different kinds of oils I've read about: drying oils and non-drying oils. Non-drying oils are things like mineral oils, vegetable oils. Drying oils are things that have drying agents in them to allow them to convert to something hard. Linseed oil, boiled linseed oil, not regular linseed oil, boiled linseed oil, tongue oil, or something called Mahoney's Utility Finish, which is this stuff. I'll talk a bit about that later, but when I use this on something like this, to eat out of, I expected this to be like a popcorn bowl or something like that. Because it's an oil, it penetrates well, it shows the grain well, but it's also inherently food safe. It's walnut oil that's been treated so that it will tolerate to the oil. By the way, I learned just last week that Molly also makes one mixed with carnauba and beeswax. So it's oil and wax together. So you can put it on whatever coat you want and then buff it, and it saves a subsequent maximum pressure, which is very good.
Linseed oil will sooner or later dry. It just will damn slow. Oil linseed oil is linseed oil with a little bit of Japan dryer.
Is that all it is? I thought it was actually a process.
Now, yeah, 100 years ago you could boil it. Today, oil linseed oil
is boiled.
Is regular with a little bit of Japan dryer, and double oil that's got even more Japan dryer.
What I typically use, or when I use oils, is a blended oil. There are a lot of formulations of mixtures of, say, tongue oil and some kind of varnish, whether it's an alkyd or a polyurethane or whatever. Or you can make your own 1/3 pure tongue oil, not tongue oil finish, pure 100% pure tongue oil, like this. It doesn't have any solvents or dryers. The dryers will come from the varnish, and I mix it with clear polyurethane. Not the satin polyurethane. The satin polyurethane has fine dust particles in there. You give it a satin finish when it dries. All that does is kind of obscure a little bit of the grain. Not a whole lot because it's a thin layer, but you don't need that. Don't take it. And solid. Now that's been attributed to Sam Aloof, our famous furniture maker. So I actually didn't come up with that. I learned about this from Frank Pitter. Now, in the end, I mentioned two resources. Two books by Jeff Jewett and Bob Flexner in the end of the back. And Bob suggests that when you do that mix, you cut the tongue oil in half. So it's 1 part tongue oil, 2 parts poly, and 2 parts salt. And I find that it dries a little faster. Tongue oil will really slow to dry. Now, if you want it to dry even faster, you can change it from mineral spirits to something like that, which is a much faster way. And last is water locks. I like water locks. It's higher. It doesn't have oil in it. It's got a higher percentage of varnishes. And this, for example, is done with 2 coats of water locks.
Do you put that on these things like your third, and the third? You put it on with a brush, or do you put it on with a rag?
I put it on with a piece of paper towel. I wipe it off. And I wipe it off.
Do you most all these things are with a cloth?
I use paper towels.
And then paper towel versus a brush. Any of these?
Well, I don't use brush. I never use brush on my turn.
Okay, so none of these.
Because it puts it on too heavy, number one. So I get sags and drips and so on and so forth. And if it's that thick, it tends to obscure the grain more. I like a thinner coat, maybe multiples of it. Rather than brush, I never use a brush.
Right, so even the lacquer and shellac, you put on with a rag?
Yeah. Well, lacquer I spray. That's the only thing I spray. I don't have a spray set up, so I'm a rattle can kind of spray.
Yeah.
And I'm not very good at it, so I'll have to use it much. I use lacquer on something where I want a large shine, like this one of them. a tree, I want a lot of shine. I want to see the lights reflected in it. So, more artistic piece, little gallery quality, I like a softer finish. Probably the most finish I would want on that piece is something like this, which is glossy but not full gloss. It's 100%. Because the shine will center the grain, will kind of detract from it. It kind of draws your eye. You really want the eye drawn to the beauty of the wood. Because, there are some turn finishes that I use one of them. They're CA blue. A lot of pen makers like CA blue. I've never used that, but I've seen the results. And it's very tough and very shiny. That's got one here. And it's easy to do. It's right away because it dries right away. So there's a lot. I've never used it, so I really can't talk about it. I do want to mention it though. And friction polish. Friction polish is a mixture of wax and shellac. I put it on the lathe, sand it up really good, like 1,000, 1,200 or so. And you put this on there, you kind of flood it, and then pick it off with a rag. A lot of spinning until it dries. It dries really shiny, and it's almost fully set right there. These pieces. So I let it wait a while, and then I buff it a little bit, and I'm done. An example of that is the finials on this were done with friction polish. And a little bit of wax in it. After I did this one, I did, I'll mention it a bit later, on the lathe, and then I took it off and I buffed it with white diamond on the wheel. This guy did a different one, real lightly. You've got to be careful because white diamond will fill the pores. It's blood, or it's sperm hard rather. It wasn't too bad really. And then I buffed the front of the wax on it. I used the buffer rather than the massage wax because I wanted to get all these grooves. The buffing wheel applies that uniformly to all these nooks and crannies. I thought that was a better application technique for this guy.
Bob, what would you say the limits are on the friction polish? When is it not up to the task for a good finish?
I've never used it on large objects. I suspect it could dry too fast for large objects, unless you flood it carefully first. I really only use it on small objects I like to finish. So I'm not sure that I'm giving you an accurate picture of it because I don't have experience with that. Waxes. I use case wax on furniture stuff. I don't use it on woodturners. I like Renaissance. It's expensive. This can cost 20 or 25 bucks, I forget which, but you only use a little bit, and put it on and wipe it off.
That's the only thing on the wood, or you put that on afterwards?
Well, it depends. This has it on it after 2 coats of water wipes. That's cherry. This is Brazilian rosewood, which is also Morado. And this has only wax on it. If it's hard enough, if it's smooth enough, wax is all you need. It's just got Renaissance prints. So, and no buffing. I didn't buff it. It's old mesh. What's the name of that stuff?
3M gold.
3M gold.
But you do about steel wool.
Well, steel wool is about 1,000. But it's hard like this. It's smooth enough. There's a lot that's smooth enough. So you don't need finishing. It doesn't really add anything to protect it. It's got all the natural oils in it anyhow. And you don't need it for smooth. I just like when it comes out. It just breaks out the color. So I like this one. Now, how do I do it? For oil finishes, like this guy, start out with sands like, depending upon the wood, 400, 800 grit. Then I blow it off with compressed air to get the dust out. I wipe on, and I use small squares of paper towel. Put them off the roll. flood it with oil, rub it in, wipe it off, or set it. Let it soak in for a while, 5 or 10 minutes. Put some more on. Let it. Eventually, you decide to take it off and take it, at least for a while. I like it off. Well, all I can get off of it with a clean paper towel. And then I wait, maybe a week. That's really all right. And then I buff it. I usually just.
It's still there on the blade? You don't know it's still on the blade?
No.
After it's totally good?
After it's totally done, take it off. There's no need to do it on the lathe because it doesn't need the speed of the friction polish. It's really just soaking it in. And with on the lathe, while you have holes or something, that covers up pieces of, so, I'll do it on my finishing station. I buff it to triple level. The 2 levels of buffing in the wheel system. The triple E, which is this red stuff. The portion of the 2 is something called white diamond. I don't think it's really a diamond paste at all. It's called white diamond, some white block, and whipping. It doesn't need that. I don't like that level of shine in a lot of my things with the white diamond. And then I wax it. The reason I wax is also
You use the wax with the wheel system, or you use another wax?
I use Rich. I haven't used the Carnauba that's part of the wheel system in a while. In fact, the only time I've used it recently is to do things like this finial, because the buffing wheel gets into all those grooves very well. Much better than I can do by hand, a lot faster. What's not good about food safety? A lot of issues about food safety. And I know I may get corrected from folks who are experts, but my understanding there's some inherently food safe things, like Mahoney's utility oil. It's a walnut oil, it's got no chemicals in there which are harmful. But I've also read, and I believe it, that once you can't smell it anymore, the solvents have disappeared, and it then becomes food safe. Is that fair? He does a lot of finishes chemistry stuff. But as long as you can't smell it, those solvents are gone and it's food safe.
Well, let's put it this way, if you can smell it, you sure hell don't want to eat off of it.
Even the things like polyurethane, which could be harmful. Resin finishes, varnishes, and so on and so forth. Depending on the wood, I'll sand it to 400, 800. I will often take it up higher, especially using that 3 in gold, which is maybe 1,000. But if you can put a thick enough coat on there, well, any of these oil finishes are similar, they're thicker than the oil finishes. We will mask a lot of that. I don't want to get chemical, so I give a little bit of safety. It's easy enough to do. Take that 3 in gold and do a similar. It's important to blow off all of the dust out of it, because it will mask, it will fill with pores, of course, and kind of mask it and affect the visual quality. There are 3 ways to blow off. You blow it off, you can get a solvent soap, paper towel, or whatever, and kind of wipe it on, and you'll see a lot of the dust come off on the paper towel, or something called tap cloth, which has got some kind of solvent and semi-sticky stuff on it to pick up all the sawdust. I don't need to buy tack cloth. I just put a little bit of mineral spirits on a paper towel and wipe it.